Okay, folks, now for something completely different. When, on the very last day of the Global Coaches House, I've got a team coming in to go into the serious detail of the performance science support aspect of life and how we bridge what happens there with the world of coaching. And just a little aside in all of this, where I personally have become concerned as a coach is that performance science has actually grown faster than coaching itself. Or more specifically, performance science has grown faster than coaches seem to be able to accommodate in their decision making. For example, we've got Penny Werner here next door, who's really top of the tree in sports psychology. And no matter how clever I think I am, I don't understand her world completely. And I've got to work out in life, where is the balance between the interface between her and athletes and myself in making the decisions. Now, the way I see this situation is this. The athlete or the team is at the center. They deliver the action. Right, the circle that's just outside them is the coach. The process is led by the coach. The coach makes decisions, whether the decisions on a tactic or a strategy or a year plan or the microcycle that they're going through. That's the coach's job. On the outside, we have performance science. These are the sciences that are that contribute to the decision making. And remember what I've just said about Penny and I, or a nutritionist and myself, or a biomechanist or myself, or a physiologist or myself. Sometimes I need their information, I need the advice that they can give, but I don't have the understanding, I can't synthesize what it is that means in order for me to make my decision. If you like, if we can give an analogy to in all of this, it's like I've got a motor car and it needs petrol. In the North Sea, there is North Sea oil. I can't put North Sea oil into my car and think it's going to work. It has to be refined. It has to be transformed into, in my world, a language that I can understand to make a decision, or my engine can use to turn it into power. Do we understand each other on this? And you might say, well, you're making a song and dance out of this, Frank. We understand all of these things. Well, if you do, congratulations. I write books and the stuff and I don't understand it. And what I don't want us ever to be in a position of is that we want to make a decision and we think we understand it, but we don't. And it actually leads to us giving an erroneous decision or piece of advice for an athlete. So what I think is going to happen in life is that there's a new profession, I believe, going to happen in your lifetime. And that profession is going to be of, maybe it's the performance director, maybe it's that person, or a performance manager. But whatever, it is somebody that I can go to and get the distillation, get the synthesis of the information so that I can make the judgment call. Now let me give you an example of where that's probably happening already. You watch the World Cup football, I guess, some of you, and there's a manager on the side, and the manager's moving around, he's shouting this and he's shouting that. Do you think he's doing that only on the basis of what he's seeing? Being fed into his earpiece is the analysis that's coming from upstairs. In some countries they'll use Prozone, for example. Are people familiar with that? technology? There's cameras all the way around the stadium, and these cameras are picking up how fast you're running over 10 meters now, as opposed to how fast you're running in the first half. And the moment the analysis machine sees that you are now a tenth of a second off the pace, for example, this information goes to me, and it's time for me to replace her with another athlete. How is that possible, Frank? Probably what you couldn't see when they're running around there, and watch it in the Rugby World Cup next year, is that between the shoulder blades there's a little patch, and it's a GPS system, and it monitors every single movement around the field. What's happening in the world of basketball, I know this, I sit in the advisory board for Nike on high performance, and they were showing us 2 years ago now an insole for your shoe, the basketball shoe, totally financed by the National Basketball Association. And these soles are pressure sensitive, and all different points around the sole. That is linked in to software that analyzes where the pressure is on the foot when you move in this direction, when you move in that direction, where you're doing a jump shot and so on. And it begins to sense whether your muscles, the muscles involved for that movement, are actually the ones that should be operating. It's fantastic technology, and what do I know about technology? I had to get somebody to fix the computer, right? I have to get somebody to check my phone. Now, what I'm trying to say is, I need to speak to somebody about this. I need somebody to help me. And I think that in that world, either in major operations like an NFL franchise, or one of the rugby union franchises, or Manchester United and other lesser teams, maybe in all these organizations they can afford to bring in somebody to do the analysis and to do the synthesis. But what if you can't? I'm wondering if there will be a secondary tier to all of this, of maybe an organization, maybe an institute of sport, maybe a university, and that we pay a fee once a year or whatever, and they make themselves available to give a translation of your athlete's physiological tests or bits and pieces into a language that you can use so that you can make a decision. So I think that's the way we're going. Now, I'm talking at the moment, I wonder if somebody could be good enough for me and pop across and ask Karen if she could please bring in the handouts. Can somebody do that for me? No, I'll do it. Okay, just ask Karen, she's in the office across here. Because what I'm going to do now is give you a blank one of these diagrams. And I want you to think in terms of your own coaching and your own world, who are the scientists, what are the inputs that you think you need? Think of putting it just to make it real, put an athlete that you know, or, thank you, put an athlete that you know, or a team that you work with, because you'll have a picture then of this team's needs or this athlete's needs. You're going to be making decisions. Who do you need the advice from? And whilst this blank's still on its way, let me give you an example of how this worked, even when I was a chief coach. After 1987, Fatima Whitbread, the Great Britain athlete, had thrown a world record in the javelin the previous year, 1986. Now 1987, very nervous, went into the situation, but she got it. She got the World Championship gold medal in good super. Thanks very much, Michelle. She got the World Championship gold medal. Michelle, I'll need the other ones in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks. She got the gold medal, and she came home, and she just went back to the system, because she'd actually brought me in to help her through to get the gold medal that particular year. I knew that the people that she was working with were not all that keen that I got involved as a chief coach, but she went back to the system, same people, and so on. Petra Falk from the DDR was second in that competition. She went back home, and the way East Germany operated, even at this time, understand this is 1986, just keep your sums here. This is 1986, 87, 88. She goes back in 1987, and the chief coach pulls Carl Hellman, who's Peterfeldt's coach, in, and they have a meeting. And there's Carl Hellman, who's having a conversation with the chief coach and with the chief coach for throws. And there are another two top javelin coaches in the room. And around the room, there's a sports psychologist, the team a doctor, the physiotherapist, a biomechanist, and so on. These are all sitting there. And the conversation starts from the chief coach. Carl, what's she going to get next year? Well, she's possibly the gold medal, but certainly the silver medal. What does she need to throw to get the gold medal? Well, she'll need to throw X. What quality consistency must she have in the season in order for X to happen? Well, she'll need to be doing at this level of consistency in training, in competitions and so on, over an average of so many competitions and so on. What's the fitness profile that she'll need to get that consistency? Well, she'll need to have this kind of score in maximum strength and abdominal strength and so on. Fine. What are the training methods that you'll need to have in place in order to be sure of these particular levels of fitness? Well, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D. Fine. What is your plan to do this? Who do you need to help you deliver the plan? And who will monitor it? How will you learn? All these steps all the way through. This is 1987. At the end of this, Carl Hellman has to design a plan. Every 6 weeks, from then to the Olympic Games in Seoul the next year, every 6 weeks, he must come in and answer to all of these people the progress level that she has at this moment. And so, for example, as a team doctor, you might say, excuse me, Carl, I've noticed that she's now got a lot of tenderness in her left hamstring. So, well, yes, Carl will say, well, she got that when she was doing X, Y, and Z. But excuse me, Carl, when you were in here 6 weeks ago, my physiotherapist and I, we spoke to you about this issue, and that she had a problem, this issue could arise because she had a weakness in the small of her back, the lumbar vertebrae. Oh, well, yes, but what exercises did you put in place to protect the lumbar section of her spine and the stabilizing muscles? Well, actually, in future you will have to address this. Now, this is an interesting piece of accountability in life, folks, isn't it? This is because it's not down to him being a wise ass every now and again and saying, oh, excuse me, who's looking after this athlete? I'm looking. No. What he must have is every single piece of intelligence, because of the minuscule differences between being great and being average, which added together out there can be success or can be failure. So listen, I'm going to ask you to do this now. I wonder if somebody could help me to get these passed around the room. And I'd like you to put an athlete or a team in there. You'll know their needs. You put your own name in the purplish colour just outside that. On the very outside, I'd like you to go round, and you may need more. You may not need all of them, but write down the area where you think you're going to need help from the world of sports science and support, and if you can, put a name beside it. And then maybe you can share what you put down and why when you've done that. Okay, let's take 2 or 3 minutes to do that. So, would anybody like to share this, or whilst you're thinking about it, maybe to give you another kind of picture of where it is I'm trying to get to? Where to put my... The way I see it is, this is you standing right here. You're the conductor of an orchestra, so imagine yourself standing there. In order for the orchestra to operate, you need different departments. You need different kinds of inputs. First violins, through to French horns, through to cellos, basses, trombones. You need all of these instruments. All of these areas of sports science are relevant to the piece of music that has to be played. In order once we identify that, then of course we need people to be brought into the team to play the instruments. In some instances, you may find somebody who is actually at soloist level, whereas you might somebody else who's a new kid in the block who's just through the door and into sports science. Whatever in life, very seldom in your team you have people who score 10 out of 10 in your standards. Sometimes there's 9, sometimes there's 8, sometimes there's 7s. But the blending of what their input is actually up to you. You can't allow the biomechanist to call the shots all the way through and ignore the physiologist. You can't do that. It's your job to deliver the harmony from this diversity, because just think of it, what on earth does a first violin know about playing a tuba? No, not a chance. They are all different kinds of inputs, different kinds of mindsets. They know their job brilliantly. It is your job to draw them into harmony. They are totally diverse and at different levels and so on. It's your job to lead the process and to lead the team. Has it ever occurred to you that when it comes to an all of these slides you can have, I'm not jealous about my slides, you can have a lot. And just pick them off the website. Has it ever occurred to you that the only persons who hear the total harmony are the conductor and the audience? The people in my orchestra can't hear each other. You don't know what's happening to this tuba across here, but you've got your score in front of you. You know the notes that have to be played. You know what you have to do. You know the technical skills that you bring to this. And I've got to know how to play you in against him, against this lady, against the gentleman at the back. I've got to know how I bring you each in to the game. Because at the end, the only person who counts is this. Everything we do in our orchestra of influence is to make sure that this soloist gives the performance of her life. Or the team at the back, if you're dealing with an orchestra. So, that's the diagram we had. Would somebody like to give me some suggestions of the kind of people that you see in your orchestra? Anybody? Aubrey.
Yes. I'm involved presently with our franchise rugby team. So I believe that I need the support of a sports psychologist to help me before, during and after the game to get some feedback. To give,
turn a little bit around so to make sure the guys at the back can.
So the first guy is a sports psychologist to help with the rugby team, to motivate them before the time and afterwards to see if the plan that he or she has with the team worked during the match. Also to get some dietitianal, nutritional advice and our preparation. And then of course the biokineticist or biomechanicist to see where we have shortages and help us to do the necessary training and and of course regular testing from the physiological side to see where the shortages are, to do a SWOT analysis. And then of course a very important thing in rugby is also a recovery and a recuperation. To get advice from that side, and then of course our match analysis after the match to get the necessary feedback, what the backs did, what the forwards did, say for instance the distance they covered, were they able to still at the last 20 minutes of the game to do the same type of work as they start the game, and so forth. And to get that feedback at the beginning of the week as we start on the Monday after the Saturday's game, to work on that and to improve the situation.
Fantastic, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Aubrey. You mentioned a couple of things in there about recovery and so on. Can I recommend a little bit later this week, there's a session on the stress busting, and one of the sections in that is going to be about rest and recovery and sleep. There'll be a big issue about sleep.
Yes.
Okay, that's Aubrey's ideas. Anybody else got, you don't have to go through your whole team, but if you've got things that you think are missing, things that just jump out to you, anybody?
Lifestyle management.
Lifetime management, thanks very much indeed. Yes, good. Making sure that we have somebody who can build in a sense of balance in what we do in life. Good stuff. Anybody else?
I looked maybe at individualising it around a certain athlete, because some might need some more support than others. So I looked at, say for instance, a girl that came into a program last year that extremely overweight and out of condition, but potentially could potentially be a world class player in her position. So more looking at her needs. So because she's so overweight, at 136 kilos for an athlete, it's about putting in that nutritional support.
Well, just let's stick with her, okay? Because these are the kind of questions that could suddenly jump at me if I was in charge of that. How many people, how many areas of influence do you think might come into helping this young athlete?
Well,
A nutritionist, obviously. Psychology, big time. Because if you do not handle this right, you could have an eating condition on your hands. And once that's in place, we're toast. You know? So, a psychologist, a nutritionist, anybody else?
Family support, or family and friend support.
Family and friend support, absolutely right. Because why are they absolutely right? Because I'm talking sports science up here, but there's a whole bunch of other things that could be built into that model. Absolutely right, man. Anyone else? Good. Anybody else?
Yeah. It's interesting just picking up on that, because I'm at the other side of the spectrum. I've got an athlete who is 9 seconds inside qualifying for Commonwealth Games, so she's got qualifying, ain't running, because she's got an eating disorder, serious eating disorder. And the key person in my life just now isn't psychology support and nutrition support, it's actually a psychiatrist. It's actually a psychiatrist rather than psychological support.
Psychiatrist.
So it's very, very deep seated, very deep rooted. Goes back many, many years.
Yeah.
And
it ends up that I know this area actually quite well. It ends up with for a lot of youngsters in the area of codependency. That they are needing approval in life all the time, and for some reason a switch went wrong way back. And if you, I don't know if you also you know the athlete well, but if you listen very carefully, an awful lot of what's in here is seeking approval and seeking support, and this wretched issue of not loving the body that I live in. You know, it's a very, very delicate area, and you're right to get the proper level of advice. I have to say, my experience on it, I have to juggle back and forth in these things, because sometimes the psychiatrist, instead of getting ownership to the athlete to grow and develop, is actually making the athlete even more dependent on the service.
yeah, I think it's an interesting, because the list of people that are surrounding her currently through the Scottish Institute primarily, Institute of Sport, but also with family, with other backgrounds, colossal. And there's a massive dependency. And
my best wishes to her and to the team who are trying to make that right, because it's a wretched problem, desperately distressing for her family, that's for sure. Desperately distressing, and of course her friends. So, but best wishes to all of them. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just simple ones. Skills specialists, certain skills that you might not have your current knowledge at the optimal range for that. So maybe looking at different skills that maybe you can get help from to address a technical issue. And then finally, just physical preparation. A course, you can look after the physical preparation.
Well, these were some of the ideas that I would have come up with that you've already done. A technologist, a psychologist, nutritionist, physiologist, biomechanist, physiotherapist, doctors, performance analysts. I've not included the family, but you would have been quite right to put that, because this will differ not only from person to person in this room, but with from athlete to athlete that you're working with. There may be different support teams that you need to go and partly that will reflect what you don't know, and partly it will reflect what the athlete needs. I mean, it's the two things that you're juggling with all the time. And down here it doesn't read very well. Specialist coaching input, because you're quite right. Many of us don't have the technical skills to cover all aspects. So with Daley Thompson, when I was working with Daley, I could look after all the track events plus a high jump. But I had Art Venegas from the University of California, Los Angeles, looking after his shot and his discus. I had David Otley, who had coached to a silver medal in the javelin, although I can't throw a javelin, I'm not a javelin coach. I actually got a technical coach to work with him, and I just looked after the program. Greg Richards looked after his long jump, who also went on to be an Olympic decathlete himself and coached the Olympic gold medalist in Erkino. And finally, Paul Brooks, the guy who wrote My Fat Greek's Wedding. He was better at that than being an accountant, I have to say, because his company went bust. But he then decided to write creatively, but he was wonderful as a pole vault coach for Daley. And it was my job then to conduct that orchestra. My job to conduct that orchestra. Okay, so I'd like you to continue to examine that and really examine yourself. What do I know? Admit what I don't know. And do I know somebody who does? Or people who do? And kind of progressively over time create a resource list of contacts so that when you come to the moment when you reach something that the athlete needs more than you're able to give, you know who your contacts will be. The process that we're in life is this very simple cyclical thing. You dream, you plan, you do, you review. You set up a new dream, plan, do, review. It's a continuous cyclic process. Now what I want to do now is show you something that you don't, it's only an example. I don't want you to think Frank Dick's telling me to do this. I'm not. What I'm asking you to do is consider that you can have in life particular, create a model where you can collect your data supported by the people that you're working with so that you can follow through on the plans that you have. This is just an idea of a way to deal with things. The name of your athlete, your team, within a team, an athlete's position, the date of birth, what is the result that you're looking for? What's the performance that will get that result? Can you describe it? What's the current status relative to the result? Are they 5th, 6th, to 100th in the world, or 1st in the world? What's the current status? What is the performance level now compared with where it is you're trying to get to? Okay? Now some of you say, well, Frank, I'm looking after a rugby player, a secular rugby player. How on earth do I know the performance? Well, if you don't, I don't think you know anything about your coaching. If you don't know the performance that somebody has to deliver and can't describe it and picture it, how are you going to get them there? If you don't know the destination, how do you plan the journey? We've got to start getting, I'm not saying that we have to be brilliantly detailed on these things, but we've got to have, for our own, if you like, sense of responsibility and accountability of all of this, we've got to have that kind of picture in our mind. What is the performance? What does it look like? What does it look like now? And then we start to make the journey. So in terms of result prognosis, for the target competition, what's going to be good enough to get gold? Because your athlete may not be going for that, but they may. Or for silver, or for bronze, or for 8th place, or for a personal best. as in terms of result. Who are the challengers for that? Who are the people who are going to be working for it? Now, even although you're only looking after your own athlete, it's pretty important to me to know who are the people standing between me and the dreams that my athlete is trying to touch. What are the who are the current performance challenges in terms of just performance, not results? What are the key performance determinants? I mean, this is the way I see it. Let's imagine you're trying to jump 2 meters 40 as a high jumper, and your athlete is currently jumping 2 meters 28. Right? 2 meters 28 is a consequence to me. And it's a consequence of a particular level of strength in the legs, a particular kind of power, a particular kind of speed, a particular level of aerobic endurance, a particular level of strength endurance. All of these things create the performance, a particular technical model. They are responsible for performance. Now we're looking at 2 meters 40. Do you know what changes you must make in each of these components in order to create that 2 meters 40 as a consequence? Now, of course, there'll be, maybe most people in the room say, come on now, Frank, it's a bit severe. I know it is, but we know each other now, don't we? You know where I come from in these things. I believe that the only function at this level, this is the high performance room, for goodness sake. We're not the other rooms, we are the high performance room. And at the end of the day, you are measured by your athlete delivering the performance that you intend them to deliver on the day. But Frank, they did a world record back in April. I don't care about that. I really don't care about that. You're in the arena on the 8th of August, in that arena, at that time of the day, and I want the performance then. Not when you feel like it, not when the sun's shining you up. I want the performance then. Or what are we doing, folks? This is the high performance room. We don't play around like some of the other guys. We are at the high performance end. We've got to think this way. And for most of us, this is why I started off the way I did this morning, for most of us, myself, for goodness sake. What do I think I know at the end of the day? Even at this, being less young now than I was 100 years ago. What do I know in total? I will come to bits that I'm not sure about. And if I'm not sure about it, who's the victim? Well, Frank, I don't feel I'm ready for this. You wouldn't be sitting in this room if you weren't ready for it, right? You are ready for it. What I want us to do is begin to think, right, there are a few things I've got to deal with here, and I better start learning these fast. And this is why, I mean, again, what do I know? This is a model that I eventually concluded was useful. What are the key performance determinants? Maximum strength, power. What are these things? How do you how do you create a score, right? What's the measurement, and how do you create a score? Then month on month, we should be looking year on year at where our key performance determinants are. You should have a record, everybody in this room, of where your athlete was today, last year, in terms of any of these measures. And you should have in your mind very clearly where it is they must get to for the target competition that you're leading for. Maybe that's Rio, maybe it's 2020. It's not for me to tell you these things. It's for you to work out and commit yourself to taking your athlete on that journey. I've put down my own ideas of actual and intended performance progressions and so on as we go through. There are preparation components that I've tried to list for you there, techniques. It's in terms of your optimal biomechanical model, scoring them 7 as high and 1 as low, so on as you move forward. What about effective execution of your athlete's techniques under pressure? How would you measure them on that? Are they robust under pressure? What about analysis frequency? How often are you going to do it, and what analysis processes are you going to use? When it comes to strength, and these are only examples, remember, I could write the book of Genesis and all of these things, as you can imagine. General basic strength, general balance strength, maximum specific strength, endurance, the various endurances, speed, general coordination, agility, general in terms of decision making, because these are not all physical things. One of the biggest things, of course, in team sport, as Alvarez just mentioned, is your capacity to read a situation, make the right decision and move on. Or in tennis, to solve a problem and set a problem at the same time. How good are they at that? Are we personally equipped to do that? Who else do we need to be advising us to do that? What about mobility? When it comes to tactical, what are they strong in? What are they vulnerable in? What is their A plan? At commencement, what is their plan? What is the retest date? What are the retest dates and so on all the way through? Tactical delivery focus, effective response to opposition. Then, of course, in the health and well-being, do they have particular conditions? Some athletes, you'll have athletes who are world-class, who may be diabetic, for example, who may have serious allergies. Is it important to know these things? I think so. We had a wonderful young athlete here in Scotland some years ago, Ross. High hurdles?
Yeah.
Bailey. That's the man. Ross Bailey. Went down to Bath to train. Went out after an evening's training, and he ordered Caesar's chicken Caesar, was it? Yeah.
No, I call it chicken combination.
And tragically there was peanuts in it. And he didn't have any kind of injection to take, and he was dead in 3 hours. World-class athlete. Is it important to know that your athlete has allergies? I hope I've just answered the question for you. Are there illnesses around? Are there any hot spots? Musculoskeletal weakness and so on. What about injuries? What about heart rate resting, body weight, hours per night of quality sleep, hydration level, dental status, optical status, oral status, medications? Do your athletes carry around in their pocket a little color-coded card to check their urine color to see if they're hydrated or not? Yes? All of your athletes? Yeah. Okay. Think about it. Dehydration is actually quite a killer at the end of the day. It can be a killer literally, but it can also be a killer in terms of your program. You should monitor. Remember one athlete downloaded the color chart on the laptop, but that was a bit difficult to be standing in the gents' toilet looking at your laptop and trying to check the color of your urine at the same time. What's their oral status, medical status, medications? I said dental status. Can you imagine a situation in our lives where that might be actually quite critical to check before they go to a training camp? Anybody? Give me a particular situation. In Bulgaria, Belmeken, East Germany, and the Bulgarians had a contract to use Belmeken as an altitude center. The only medical center that was up there was a dentist's. Why is that? Any infection in the body, when you go to altitude, it's accelerated and made worse. You should never go to altitude if you're carrying a bug of any kind, because you'll go up there and you'll be quite seriously ill. Go up there with a dental problem and you'll have a big problem. Just thoughts, folks. I mean, you might be looking at this and say, Frank, this is you're just leathering Scottish. Trust me, I'm not.
And that's why they say when you go abroad, like when you go to Commonwealth Games, and get your dental check before you go, because it's not just the problem it can give you, it's the cost and the different ways of dealing with it when you get to the other side as well.
And I used an optical check here. Yeah. I think we should never assume that athletes have got perfect 20/20 vision. And if there is an issue, we better examine that, because when it comes to spatial judgments and all sorts of things, that could be the one area. They're perfect technically, that could be one area they can't judge distances properly. That's all I'm saying. Physiology, nutrition analysis, nutrient status, nutrient allergies, full blood biochemistry, urinalysis, respiratory conditions, aerobic capacities, lactate, etc., etc. Immunoglobulin assays for stress, testosterone versus cortisol for stress, etc., etc. And finally, into the last page is here, psychological tests. What is the attitude or motivation profile in general during training, pre-competition, when they're in the lead in the competition, when they're in pursuit in the competition, at the start, in the main body of the competition, at the finish? What about post-competition? What about crisis management, lifestyle balance? Somebody's already mentioned that today. Personality profile, coach-athlete relationship debrief, and so on. In terms of technology, what technology do they need? Your sport might, if they're on bicycles and so on, you better understand the technology that's wrapped around that and so on. Opponent analysis. Well, what are we doing looking at the opponent's strength? We better work out the right tactics to dust them, or they'll dust you. What are the techniques that they use? What are the conditioning states, the tactics, health and well-being? You might say, I can't find out these things, Frank. Find them out. You'll find them somewhere. I'm not telling you that this is what you have to do. I'm suggesting to you that you sort out your own form of this. Develop it to meet how you do your coaching and make it great for your athlete. Any questions about that? Some people think that this is what life is like. The banking industry definitely thought that this is what life was like. It's like a flat water glide, sailing towards the sunset with a favourable wind in our sails. The weather forecast says constant weather like this for the foreseeable future. So you sit back and you drift towards the setting sun. Glass of champagne in your hand. All is well in life. And you've prepared for this life. But the truth is, this is what life is actually like. It's a whitewater ride. It twists and turns. The only uncertainty in our arenas of life is uncertainty. There's no such thing as certainty out there. There's only uncertainty. We've got to equip ourselves to deal with that world, not the one you've just seen. And if all you're prepared for in life is the one that's that flat water ride, do you think you can cope in here? So the fact is, adversity, uncertainty, change is what we're preparing the athlete for in terms of the mindset. Because the world's uncertain, you don't know what the solution will be in advance. You can't, or that's called a certainty. You don't know. But you can have the mindset that reads the situation, doesn't think, oh shit, and walk off the field. You see the situation and you almost get excited by it. The adversity, the challenge of change, the uncertainty. We prepare the mindset for that. We get them fit to a certain extent to deal with all eventualities. I remember I was very fortunate as the chief coach to have in my team people like Sebastian Coe. He was one of my boys. Daley Thompson, I coached him personally myself, as you know. People like Dalton Grant, people like Steve Ovett and so on. But when you looked at these endurance athletes, both of them would say the same thing, and Steve Cram, Frank, we're prepared for anything. They were going to be fast enough if it came to the kill. They were going to have the long-term endurance to run it off the front if they had to. Mo Farah, I don't know much about Mo, but complete athlete. I mean, what does the opposition think when they see his 400 meters time, his 1500 meters time, he's 5 and he's 10? Good night. We're in a bit of trouble here. Equip your athlete physically for the stresses and strains of the uncertainty that's out there, but equip them mentally to have an attitude that life is not always going to be perfect. How on earth do you deal with that, Frank? Well, you come back to this little diagram I put up for you earlier on today. And since we're together and we've got all the other persons left now, we can talk about this because we understand this world. give me examples in your world of controlling the controllables.
Not worrying about what your opponent does.
One of them. Good. Okay, my daughter's wedding, I told you. What have they done? They've been through this exercise on paper, off paper, in the room, what the room would look like, what the smell of the flowers would look like, smell like, where the window where the light would strike this particular piece of colour, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Was there a creaky board? Should we put something down on the floor to stop creaking as they walk towards the altar, and so on and so on and so on? Come on, tell me. You're taking an athlete, I don't know, to the Commonwealth Games. Give me the controllables that you've dealt with before they get out there.
Their physical capacity is one of them, and their
Right.
obviously clothing attire as well, so the clothing that they have, so their gear, their equipment.
Good. Right, come on now, folks. I want you to give me something. I want you to tell me you've been listening. Come on, tell me. Speak to me. Anybody.
Make sure the food nutrition, they have that available to them, don't rely on everybody else for it.
Absolutely make sure that what it is that they have to eat, you've checked it. They've got allergies, you've checked that. Right? These are the kind of controllables. Come on, give me some more.
Sports medical support.
We're going to have that. If there's an issue, that's the person. Right? Good. And you've spoken to the doctor in advance because you know the athlete can have this and this and this, so you've prepped the doctor. Right, good. That's a controllable.
Yeah, lifestyle stuff for sleep.
Lifestyle stuff for sleep, making sure that how many of you now have got a little monitoring device so that when the athlete goes to sleep at night, you've got an accurate record of whether they had a good night's sleep? Hands up, everybody's got one now. One? Anybody else? Come on, folks. If we don't get the sleep right, we're going to be toast when it comes to the sharp stuff. Anybody else? Give me a controllable.
Logistics, public transport, logistics.
Well done, ma'am. Absolutely correct. I want to, when I go into Olympic Games, I knew exactly how much time it would take to clear customs going through the airport, to get onto the transport, how long it would take to get to the village, how long it would take to get through accreditation. In all of these things, you're going to get dehydrated. It's a hot country. I'll make sure you have water with you all the time to make sure you don't get dehydrated before you go in. The distance between the training track and the village and the transporting times and how you do that. How you'll get to the village. What time? What time do you get them out of their beds in the morning? If they've got a marathon at 7, starting at 7, Tokyo, we had to start at 7 o'clock in the morning for the Marathon World Championships. That means that the boys are getting out of their beds at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get them getting out of their beds at 3 o'clock in the morning for a month beforehand. What are they going to eat when they get up? Who's going to meet them at the door and get them down to breakfast? Who's going to be chatting to them, keeping them good at that time in the morning when nobody else wants to speak to anybody? You're absolutely right. All of these logistics things, you've got to iron out well in advance. That's a controllable. Anybody else?
The whole thing of time change.
Time change. We can plan this in advance. We can get them eating it because what you know the biggest problem with time change is you change your eating patterns. That's the biggest problem. It's not your sleep, it's your eating. And your body being loaded at a time to digest things when it is not accustomed to it and it doesn't like that very much. Other kinds of adaptation, humidity, temperature, altitude, if necessary. Come on, folks, give me the controllables. This is the high performance group.
Your training facilities, make sure that...
Have you got all the training facilities in place? Can they meet the training programs that your athletes need before they go out there?
Tapers.
Typist?
Tapers before leading up to the competition.
Tapers, sorry ma'am. Yeah, sorry about my ears. Yes, it's age. Got it, yep.
Sorry, Frank, I've just walked in. Sorry, I missed the earlier.
I've said this diagram here, give me an example of controllables. The things that we can deal with in advance.
Attitude.
Attitude, yep.
Your accommodation and your is your accommodation and you, the food that they get, are they used to it?
Absolutely right. Anybody coach basketball players here? Right. What's your biggest problem when it comes to accommodation in a normal Olympic village?
Beds are too small.
Absolutely right. So what would you do to control the controllables?
Get bigger beds. One thing we've done is move the bed forward, put 2 chairs at the pillow end, make the pillow the sort of head end, it's got chairs.
Okay, right, we're running out of time here, but I'm really wanting to get your heads around where I am now. Give me somewhere where you can get a marginal gain in your sport. Diet, okay.
Just control that a bit more in terms of.
Technically speaking, the moments where you can get a marginal gain are everywhere. They're all round about you. They're everything that you, all of this stuff we're talking about here, every one of these items carries something that could be a marginal gain. Every one of them. In cycling, putting people into wind tunnels, having them modelled against wind and finding out whether the shape of the helmet, how they hold their arms, where their body's going to be positioned. Come on, give me some examples of marginal gain.
But gymnastics make it like, you know, we use chalk in the bars. Sometimes you go to a competition, it's in block form, sometimes it's in powder form. And the athletes being able to work with limited chalk, with maximal chalk.
Good, now we're talking.
Having the right people for the job.
Having the right, absolutely. Yeah, Chris.
Competition uniform, critical.
You see the Scottish parade uniform? I must show you that. Did anybody see? Anybody see the website? It's a funny thing about Hitler. As a member of the Scottish team, when somebody told him he had to wear the Scottish parade uniform. It's all done in subtitles. It's hilarious. Anyway, yes, the uniform itself. Because why would we want flappy things? To think about the world of rugby, they were actually probably faster than most. The English rugby team, I hate to mention England here being a Scottish, but the English rugby team, when they went to the Rugby World Cup, they didn't want to have stuff like this that you could grab and pull off. Your hand would slip off it all the time. They were thinking about this all the way through. Uniforms. Anybody else?
Like protective stuff, like in rugby, protective stuff, mouth guards, and all sorts of.
On the button. What about error elimination? What do you do to get rid of the errors that are happening in the program?
Recovery.
Ice baths, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, in terms of recovery, absolutely, yep. Okay, I'd put it in that back to. I might actually put it as a marginal gain, but yep.
You have to constantly be reassessing what you're doing.
Constantly resetting, making sure you debrief every time. Reflective learning stuff every time. Finally, an agility to change mindset. How would you do that? How would you give a person a mindset and an agility to change? What do you do? Practice it. Put them in weird situations. I actually used to do this with people like Gilly Thompson. I'd phone him up and give him a situation. You've taken the bar off twice at 5 meters. Hingson's cleared. You're going to get your pole. You're reaching for the pole. And just as you do so, a downy rain starts to fall. And the wind begins to pick up from the top right-hand corner. How did you get on? Hang up the phone. And then he'd spend a few hours trying to sort this out in his head. But by the morning, he could tell me what Hingson's face looked like when he'd got over the bar, when he would have to change his vest, and so on all the way through. So you don't actually have to go through it in reality, but whatever your brain must know, you've been there before. So you can rehearse it in a number of ways. Finally then, we learn to leverage the uncertain. Each one of us in the chain, what I put up there already this morning, each one of us in this chain that connects us from where we are to where we want to get to, each person, each moment influences that. A marginal gain, error elimination, an attitude to change and uncertainty, controlling the controllables. Each one of these links, it's imperative we get it right. And the moments are everywhere. So, let me leave you then with this. We've got well into time now. I'd like you to reflect on what you've learned this morning so far. There's actually 3 bites, but the most important one, I guess, was Martin. But think of the 3 things that you've listened to this morning. Go out, have a leg stretch, grab a post-it, and just write on it, is there something, because of what you've learned this morning, is there one thing you're going to stop doing? Is there something you're going to start doing? And is there something else that you're going to keep doing, but you're going to be even better at it? Now, you may not want to do all 3, but please make sure you do at least one. Okay, off you go. Thank you.